This is the stuff
That's
I
good.
really focus on.
Yeah. Yeah, let me ask this question, Mr. Gombis. Besides your knack for calling into sports shows with incredible insight, what other secret superpowers would you say you possess? Any?
Yeah, it's just changing tires.
Okay, nice.
Nimbleness, driving. I'm a nimble driver.
Nice.
Speedy.
In the GTI, except for the poor deer that you hit.
Yeah, well, as a case in point, I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and I swear you're not supposed to swerve. 'Cause that's when bad things happen. But I did swerve slightly and braked. Okay. I would have hit him head on. So yeah, I think I have actually superior driving skills.
I like that. I like that.
Cultivated, especially during high school, delivering pizzas, high school and college, zooming around town. I always know I know the shortcuts, the back roads.
Nice.
Nice. There's not really much else.
Did you get many tickets?
Yes, I did.
Delivering pizza? Okay.
Not delivering pizzas, but like in high school, I had like 17 or 18 tickets. This was back when
That's a lot.
I got a ticket leaving court, leaving traffic. Yeah, this was I think that's the one thing I could never get in trouble for. My dad he is the most dangerous human being on the road. So it's like it's like, yeah, well, it's another one. Bummer.
Do you ever ride with him still? Do you allow that to happen?
Yeah, I was down there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was down there whenever, last weekend or the weekend before that, whenever this is. Yeah. Visit them quite a bit. He'll get in the car and
you just buckle up, buckle all the belts.
Yeah. Hold on to your butts.
Yep.
Yeah. What movie's that from?
Because
I know it's a movie. Yeah. See, I know it's a movie. It's taken me years to understand that almost everything Stafford says comes from a movie. And I'm not well versed in the movie database of quotes to know. But I know that. I simply know that it is a movie quote.
Yeah.
You seem to have a bit of savvy there, Mr. Gombis, as well.
Yeah.
In terms of your movie quote database.
Yeah, usually anything Wes Anderson or Coen's.
Yeah. Yeah. You going to watch Asteroid City?
Yeah. June 23rd, I think, isn't it?
Okay.
I just saw that today. Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine. We're making a plan to go see a film.
Nice.
That one looks good.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last one was a bit French Dispatch. I don't know. I like it,
but
a
couple of them.
Yeah.
Not all the stories, but a couple of them I liked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys got like a website where you have your merch? What do you have?
Well,
this is all we have. This is from
mugs?
The pastor's retreat thing.
Yeah, we do have mugs.
Yeah.
Right there. And for those of you not on YouTube, I just waved at my face. There you go. It's so great seeing each other now.
I
have everything all designed up. We've got shirts and mugs and hats and something else all sitting in a folder on my desktop.
Gombis, talk about that hat for a second.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Let the people know about that hat.
It's nice and snug, fits well.
Yeah.
Potential merch hats are can't really vouch for the quality, but that one looks really nice.
Nicely embroidered.
Very cool.
Very
simple.
Do you have any Faith improvised merch?
No. Here's my hang up, and maybe you guys can help me with this. I would love to get mugs. Coffee mugs. Yeah. Because that's like mugs. The one thing that I do whenever I travel somewhere. I get a coffee mug or a beer glass. But it's like if you have a mug, it's just the symbol.
Yeah.
Like that's sufficient.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just feels like it should have on one side like your cover art, and on the other side it should say something like a quote. But I mean, I just don't. Yeah. For people that don't say things that are significant, I don't know what. Like I don't have a.
Yeah. No, you do.
I don't have.
You do. The social range of dynamics. That could be your. Like. Well, let's try to come up with
like
a
scientific diagram for it with like.
Yeah.
Some sort of Venn, some sort of Venn diagram. Here's that. That's what would be great. Is on one circle is breakfast burrito.
Oh.
On the other circle, circulatory dynamics, and then the middle is the kingdom of God.
That would do it.
That would do it. That would be okay. So we got to work on that, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard it here first. If anyone's still listening, and that's amazing, because it's like, Tim, you've become such a good friend that if we just hang out for an hour, I'm okay with that.
Oh, totally, man.
I forget that other people are wanting to listen or maybe forced to by their parents. I don't know what it is, but
this
sit down and listen to Voxology.
Too many traffic tickets. Listen to this.
That's right. Yes, this will help you go slower. No question about it.
Word.
All right. So, Dr. Gombis, you're teaching. Our friend Susie is taking a Ephesians class.
Oh, really?
With you over the summer.
Oh, that's cool.
Fuller, right? Yep.
Pardon?
Yep. Fuller.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Fuller.
Yep. Teaching this course, it starts in, I don't know, 2 weeks or something like that.
What is it? All via Zoom? Is it all via Zoom?
Yeah, it's virtual.
Okay, virtual but it's not pre-recorded.
I will have lectures recorded.
Oh.
And then we'll do some other live stuff.
Did you film those?
I've lectures? Not yet. This week. The calendar's cleared for this week.
Oh, good. Hey, sign up for Tim's class. There's a lot of forethought.
Yeah,
put into
it's gonna be awesome.
And production value.
Yep. Man, he wears the same outfit the whole semester. One outfit.
All right, so there'll be some pre-recorded lectures. There'll be
which
some
should be really
dynamics.
Done. They should be done like those YouTube videos. Like you should be go into straight influencer mode and just be like,
"Hey guys." Yeah, you got to do "Hey guys" every time. You got to open with "Hey guys"
and smash
that subscribe button. Yeah, yeah. That's, dude. Come on, you'd have a great YouTube following. Absolutely. All right, so. Speaking of Ephesians, we are panning the gold from the dirt of 21st century American Christianity with Dr. Gombis. There's a metaphor.
The gold.
And yes. And
sort of sounds like spanning the globe.
Well, that too, man. That was every Saturday.
Oh, totally.
Every Saturday. Yep.
The crazy thing is that skier that wiped out, he was fine.
He was.
That's the most awful looking thing, when that skier just plowed.
Anyone under 50 is going to have a hard time remembering ABC's Wild World of Sports.
Yeah. With who?
With what
was his name?
McKay. I just remember the agony of defeat.
Jim McKay.
Jim McKay. The agony of defeat.
Yeah.
Which led to all sorts of podiatrist
appointments.
But come on. So dumb. So dumb. So we've talked about suffering and evil and sin, and so I wanted today to pick up the very light topic of the powers and the principalities, because through the Gospels we read about unclean spirits. Jesus refers to this Satan as the archon of the world. Paul talks. What does he use? 14 different words in Ephesians. Is it something like that? For powers, principalities, rulers, authorities.
Yeah.
And obviously they're referring to something. And I love the story that you tell about how you wanted to study Ephesians for your dissertation, but then you realized, there's this whole other thing that keeps being referenced in terms of powers and principalities. So I'd love if we could just to kind of talk, what was your inherited culture's understanding of demonology or whatever, and then what happened when you began pursuing your study of Ephesians to kind of wake you up to this other thing that was happening?
Yeah, I never let's see here. I grew up just straight up evangelical, non.
You didn't read the Frank Peretti novels?
I did not. Mostly just because I wasn't a reader when I was younger.
That's fair.
Besides, the sports section or
Dear Abby.
Yeah, that stuff was just. It was all that demonology stuff was just unformed in my upbringing, it was sort of non-Pentecostal or non-charismatic evangelicalism, and non-expressive. You know, it wasn't like oppressive, but like there, you know, like in my church growing up, it was just really straight up evangelical. There was not like not a lot of like people that were very expressive during singing and all that kind of stuff. Although you had some of that, and I think that like demons and Satan and all that was not really referenced regularly. I mean, I would not have heard about it. I think that it would have been sort of, I'm trying to search for the term, kind of like angelology or the spirit world or whatever. It would have been talked about on an ad hoc basis. Like, man, how did so-and-so walk away from that car crash? Well, you know, so an angel must have, or God must have, or, you know, what, that kind of thing. But it would have always been very like ad hoc and not like I just always wondered if somebody were the culture that I grew up in, if someone were talking like that and they were pressed to like identify whether they really mean it or whether they really believe that's true or not. I don't know that they could have. It probably would have been something like, well, I mean, I don't know. You never know. But it wasn't, there wasn't a lot of that kind of talk, you know? And so like, I mean, while you were asking that question, I'm just thinking like, what would I have ever thought the powers and principalities are? I don't even know.
Yeah.
I don't, maybe angels.
I would have had no category for that. Yeah.
Yeah. I would not. I think that was the thing that struck me 20 some years ago when I started studying those figures. Like I never even thought about them. Like I would have read Ephesians, like literally at that point, hundreds of times. Never would have paused over those. They had no meaning. And I like to the extent that the reference in 3:10, I didn't even remember it. And that's after I read almost all the sermons that Martin Lloyd-Jones gave on Ephesians, like that 8-volume set. Like when I was in college, I read, I think the first 6 volumes, and he talked quite a bit about, I mean, he kind of had a pretty sophisticated understanding of demons and angels, or pretty extensive. But even after reading that, it just didn't register. It's not, I never found talk about angels or demons to be a satisfying way of describing things. I just never thought about them because it just didn't make sense to me.
Did you watch Touched by an Angel at all?
Don't think so.
Was there weeping? Okay. Roma Downey. Anyway. So when did that start to change?
That started to change, I think, when I started studying, like I saw structurally, this is so boring. I saw structurally, like grammatically, the powers and authorities are like important, you know?
Yeah.
They're at the beginning and the end and right in the middle. So it's like, all right, something's going on with them.
Yeah.
And then I read, I think I read an article by Peter O'Brien who talked about the enemy, you know, these enemies of the church. What are they? What do they do? And just started, like, there wasn't a lot of material on them. And I got really into the Jewish worldview, loads of Jewish texts that sort of talked about angelic figures. And was like, wow, this is just really fascinating. There's this whole world of making reference to these figures that Paul is drawing on and sort of signaling or tipping his hat to. And the way that Jews in the Jewish people in the first century world sort of made sense of their world was making reference to these figures. So, and that I realized that there's a big, a whole bunch of like Old Testament texts that are being drawn on. Like, was it Deuteronomy 32:8? Which is
the apportionment of the nation.
Yeah, like I never saw that before. And then of course there's like there's that, and then there's Psalm 82 where God walks into the council of the gods and says that they're going to be judged. And just come and understand that there's a whole backstory. It just was so interesting to me. And then it was also helpful to see what function they played for Jewish thinkers. Like, they weren't just fascinated by them. They were part of how Jewish people in the ancient world would have just come to grips with, like, what happened to this world? Like, what is happening here? Why is it that we do believe that our God is the creator and the king over all creation, and he's the champion God. He's the great God over, highly exalted above all other gods, but we are in exile. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And the nations are stronger than we are, and they're all idolatrous. Like, what is going on? And the way that they explained all that to themselves was by reference to these archangelic ruler figures that were supposed to be doing God's will, but had rebelled and, like, have perverted everything so that, like, things just go wrong, and that people just sort of feed their worst impulses and they do damage to each other, and groups oppress other groups. Like, that was how they explain the world to themselves, which I think is just really, really interesting.
So Paul draws upon those traditions. Did that world, was that adjusted at all for Paul? Obviously, coming to Christ adjusted that world for him. But is there any trace of him either embracing that worldview wholeheartedly or not prior to Jesus? Because obviously Jesus reconfigures that world. But is there any insight into Paul's thinking about that world prior to the Jesus? As a Pharisee, would he have just held that worldview?
I think so. He seems to, because he makes reference to those figures quite a bit, and the reference in Colossians ties together. It ties together sort of exactly how that world works when he says, make sure that you're not carried away by some kind of person that comes. I'm butchering this. Don't be carried away by some sort of teaching or philosophy according to human tradition, and then according to the stoicheia. And it's like, that's what they do. They sort of insert into just the bloodstream of our thinking. They insert all these perverted mindsets and perverted ways of thinking, and they distort imaginations at sort of a corporate level. And so that's his world. Like, he doesn't know any other world. That's just how the world works for him. And and I think that also is for him to proclaim the gospel that is relevant to his time, that's the language that you use, because it's also for him real. That is, these characters had perverted creation itself. Jesus Christ, in his death and resurrection, defeats them, and he's opening up a brand new realm within creation. So I think it allows him to sort of articulate his gospel, or he just does articulate the gospel in those terms, that all of the entities that hijacked God's good world and are doing damage to it, Christ has defeated them.
So Paul would say, I'm just trying to track, these are created entities, that they are persons or personages or something. They have will or intellect. They were supposed to help in the administration of God's world, in participation with God more than humans, maybe. We're
at a different level.
Interact with them.
At a different level. And really, go ahead, Mike.
No, I think that's an important point, that I have a picture of the demonic as a demon on my shoulder and an angel on my other shoulder, or the pitchfork, or I blew a tire, and so some sort of spiritual attack.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is that Paul conceives of these powers on such a grander scale than that.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to summarize, these are created entities, but they operate at an entirely different level. Do you want to speak to what that level is?
Yeah, like at a cosmic level or a macro level, or the way that the Old Testament portrays them and that Jewish thinkers would have portrayed them, is that they're also called the gods of the nations. or angels of the nations, and they, the way that Jewish people would have seen this is that over each one of the nations, God has appointed one of these figures, and they were responsible for the personality of that nation, or the general orientation to life that nation would have, and like arranging its festivals and holidays and like all of that kind of stuff. And they were supposed to be invisible because the high point of God's creation is humans. And so they're supposed to sort of foster human flourishing and be invisible and not have any kind of like, they're just not supposed to show up. And there wasn't really supposed to be any interaction between humans and them. But in Genesis 6, where the story starts,
there's interaction.
Like they interact, they break through, and they somehow like take on bodies and have sex with women, and like there's a race of giants on the earth in that time, like all that sort of epic history stuff, primeval history or something. But they're supposed to be invisible, and then they rebel, and they do all kinds of, like Paul calls them in Ephesians, they're cosmos graspers, and it's almost like instead of selflessly overseeing their appointed realm to make sure that human life wherever they were is characterized by flourishing, they've like they don't want to be deputies, they want to be final, they want to control their realm, and so they're like gripping hard on that, and it's all about control, power, domination, and making sure that human life is not characterized by flourishing at all, but feels like oppression and alienation and pain. Yeah, totally. So that's what's happening with them. They're behaving. They're sort of making available for humans all kinds of ways of life that are degrading, and they're sort of tempting humans to see those ways of life as preferable.
Yeah. All right, I have Tim. I know your wheels are turning. I have like 3 questions I got to get through, really quickly. So in Daniel, when Daniel meets the archangel in the vision, and the angel was wrestling with the prince of Persia, that would be an example of a god over a nation.
Yeah.
For instance, when Paul talks about the armor of God and this figurehead of Satan. Right, the Satan or the Satan. Is that the embodiment of the powers? Is he one of the powers? Is he a personal expression of the powers, or how should we understand that figure?
Yeah,
does that figure stand at the head of that council in opposition? How should we understand that?
Yeah, it seems like he in the Jewish texts. Satan is sort of like the chairman of the board in some way. Like he's sort of at the top of an organization chart. He's top. He kind of oversees the whole thing. And then there are all these like cosmic ruler figures at the level of like archangels that all, I don't know if there's a reporting structure, but it's like that there's like tiers. And then at the ultra local level, they don't show up in Paul very much at all, but like in the Gospels, like at the ultra local level, like local to you, me, single people, that's where like demons are seen to be doing their work. But
so what's the relationship between the unclean spirits we encounter in the Gospels and the principalities and authorities? Do we know what that is, or
I don't think there's much of one. Honestly, I don't. Okay. They're all sort of doing like the unseen realm is just such a mystery. There's not like you get data points, but then you don't get any kind of idea of how they're connected. Like what's going on here with these? It's like, well, all you see is those ones doing this and these ones doing this, So and I just that whole spiritual realm in so many ways is a real mystery. I think. Yeah. But I think that the payoff, like why these are important figures, is because Jewish people in the first century world, it it helped them understand that there's a logic to the present evil age. Like there's a genius to it. There's a brain to it. There's a, it's not like, this is not new. You don't live in a neutral world. There's constant, idolatries are constantly being generated, and they're out there and they're available. And there are these kind of cosmic geniuses making sure that we're seduced into those. And so for me, like as a modern person, I don't think that, we have to like affirm or deny their existence or even ever think about them, except to know that, there's a logic to the present evil age, and that like being seduced, like power is not neutral. Control is going to be a constant temptation. We're always going to be sort of seduced in certain ways. And we got to be on the lookout for all that.
Yeah. So yeah, 2 questions in that. I mean, first is, what would Paul construe as the role of the church in terms of spiritual warfare? Because when I hear that, I hear praying against demons and binding demons and a thing I've got to read, or like that has all the right words or whatever. And then the second question is a bit of a riff on, to what degree do we give these things credence? Are they figments of a first century worldview, or is it true? And I'm presenting, I know those aren't the only options, but I'm presenting it kind of that way because I think that's how people feel when they hear about this stuff. It either becomes this place of obsession where I need to know what's going on, and I'm intrigued by, the people that talk to demons or whatever. Or I just kind of go, that's first century thinking, and God bless them, but we know better.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. What was your first question?
Spiritual warfare.
Oh yeah. What is spiritual warfare? In my opinion, it's, it is not at all kind of like flashy and spectacular and calling out demons. There's nothing driving that in the New Testament. I think that's completely counterproductive, and in fact probably could be, you could probably say about that's actually to give in, or sort of to lose spiritual warfare, because I think spiritual warfare in Paul is, if you just think from the negative, like what the powers and authorities are doing is they're so orienting the present evil age that we will pursue courses of selfishness, sensuality, unchecked sensuality, and greed. Those there's like a couple of triads that show up whenever Paul talks about the powers, and they're usually those. And so that's what the dark powers are trying to get us to do. And spiritual warfare involves doing the hard work of analyzing in our community, in what ways are we all seduced to pursue greed, unchecked sensuality, selfishness? In what ways am I pursuing prestige and power and the furthering of my name? And then in what ways can we creatively counteract that? How do we creatively love? How do we put ourselves and our bodies on the line in service, and have like all of those healthy conversations about how we can do each other good, and how we can be involved in healthy relationships where there's difference. So one of the key things that the powers do is they kind of inflame spaces where there are lines of difference, like between male and female, or racially or ethnically. And one of the specific and strategic ways, according to Paul, of how the victory of Christ can be magnified and glorified and seen in the spiritual realm is when the church meets at places of difference, and we celebrate, and we see those opportunities as opportunities to give and receive gifts, and we don't destroy each other, but we celebrate. And like, this is why why Paul is so insistent about the Lord's Supper, the Lord's meal. Mm-hmm. It's like because that is the most, in the first century world, that's the most strategic practice for saying this is who we are, and we all belong and lines of social class, gender, race, ethnicity.
Would you say?
What's that?
Would you say it's reconfigured social dynamics?
Totally reconfigured social practices. It's a new habitus.
Yes,
I'm trying to use that word a bit more.
Yes, I love
it. Radically new dynamics of new creation. Look like that. That is spiritual warfare. That's how you see God's victory in Christ in the spiritual realm. It's very concrete, very practical, and we shouldn't be surprised. This is the kind of stuff that Jesus says to do.
Yeah. The second question was, to what degree do we orient ourselves around that worldview? Because I can argue it either way. Because on the one hand, I'm like, I want to see the world the way Jesus did.
Yeah.
And Jesus saw Satan falling like lightning, and he was casting out spirits, and like that was a thing. He's like binding the strong man. Like that was a pretty major part of at least how Mark reports his early ministry. That was a central part. On the other hand, I'm like, well, if the orientation of the powers is against certain forms of flourishing and for forms of domination and power abuse and greed or whatever, then I don't have to worry about, the Ouija board and reading Harry Potter and, whatever else. So how do I configure, how do I bring that forward into today's world? How much influence, how much credit, how much do I give that room?
Man. Yeah, that's a tough one. I could just say where I'm at, and there's not a lot of, I give, I can't think. I have a lot of respect for the mystery in the universe. There's a lot that I don't know. And I have a lot of respect and deference toward other Christian people who see things differently from how I do. But for me, there are two levels that this is working at. And it seems to me that all the powers and authorities that work at a macro level have made me do a lot of reading in like social criticism and social, especially from people who are differently located ethnically and racially and than I am and gender wise, because I want to see the world the way other people do. I want to practice radical compassion and so I want to learn a lot about how social practices and social dynamics in various habituses, how does that all look? What's actually happening in our world, and how am I caught in systems? Because the powers work through systems. Now, I don't have to know what's the name of the God of America, or what's the name, what are some of the specifics? I just don't care, because what I do know is that what's important is how it shows up. That's at the macro level.
That's good.
At the local level, where like demons and unclean spirits are at work in the Gospels, I have a lot of questions. I don't know, is there a sense in which people were right, like who said things like, well, in the first century world, the way that they talked about that was with reference to the spirit world. What we know is that these are mental health issues. I don't know that. I don't feel qualified to kind of weigh in. And I have a high degree of skepticism for people when I hear narrations of life that draw on the spirit world. Like when people when they account for their life in reference to angels and demons, I just don't, because I guess I'm just really skeptical. Like I was down at Steve's this week and I came back and I'm like, I know I didn't put that there, like in my kitchen. And I'm like, wow, some demon in here, or is this what's happening? Because it seems like that's a way of narrating what happens in our lives that, to my mind, you can't prove it, and it's not helpful in the sense that like what is my responsibility is for me personally to like knit myself more effectively with the members of my community and to be a good friend and to like develop the moral muscles and grow up into the fullness of what it means to be Tim, which, learning a lot about that, about having hard conversations and about showing up fully in relationships and all of that. And it's like, that's too often we avoid all of that by just making reference to causation in the spirit world or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm having a conflict with this person. I don't want to assume that there's a demon involved in some way or they're demon possessed or something like that. I'd rather show up and have the hard conversation. Oh, I don't want to, but I find it more fruitful to have a hard conversation and to lay all our cards on the table and to sort of inhabit conversational postures oriented by cruciformity, because that doesn't lead to growth. That is growth. Like, that's human growth.
Yeah. And the other one sheds all responsibility or agency from the relationship.
Yeah.
Like my tire blew out Monday, but it's like, I should have, there were some signs I just ignored. So yeah, I remember when I lived in California that our building was broken into and someone had a bike stolen, and there were some wonderful, wonderful people that were of a different bent and saw spirituality differently, and they all went up on the roof and kind of did a prayer walk around. And again, I just was like, I don't know, I don't want to be insulting, but I just thought, okay, well, that was the parking spot closest to the street. He had a bike in the back of his car. You could see it. Like, that's probably what's happening here.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so like lock your bike up, and making reference to other dynamics that are happening. I don't see how it's helpful at all. And I know there are very, very thoughtful people that just see things differently, and that's totally cool. But spirituality to me has everything to do with the unity that we enjoy as the church. And spirituality is, the way I see it, cultivating my own growth so that I am a gift to that body, and so that I'm in the kind of relational posture where I'm receiving the gifts that other people can offer. That's spirituality, because that body is what the Spirit has created. So being good at being that is spirituality to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Yeah. I hate just complimenting things that you say, but that was really good.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's just, I don't have,
I know that is like I've struggled with this over the last couple of years, because I've mentioned, the problems of individuality on my podcast, and I've gotten pushed back, and which I really appreciate, because it just helps me make sure that I'm not fooling myself, and sharpen my own thinking. And so I've done a lot more thinking about, like, well, what are these private practices, like spiritual disciplines and all this kind of stuff?
Yes.
There's such a long history of all that. Totally. And I think that so much of that inner work that we do that's really good and valuable, I'm starting to see it a whole lot more as preparation for spirituality. Like, that's not, do you know what I mean? Like, that's not necessarily, I'm not growing when I have time in the morning, I'm thinking about a certain way of relating to another person. Like, there's no growth that happens from like seeing it clearly. The growth and the spirituality happens when I have, I need to do this. There's a couple people I need to reach out to and like invite into conversation that will not be enjoyable conversations. But they're so necessary, and I know that that's what spirituality is, because the Spirit, created that entity, the church, and so my participation in it is my spirituality. It just seems to me, and there's so much spirit talk there's so much spirit talk that's been hijacked to speak of individual practices that I don't know that it's entirely appropriate. But I'm gonna just give my opinion. I know that sort of. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Might be a minority opinion, but
that's just like your opinion, man.
It's just like your opinion, man.
There it is. I know that one. Big Lebowski. There it is. And there's an in there. That's like your opinion, man. I knew that. Yes. I feel like Captain America.
I understand that reference.
Yep, there it is again. All right, let's. I mean, Tim, are you okay if we just explore this for just a second?
I mean, I have 5,000 questions.
I know. The Principalities and Powers convo is Tim.
I've been pushing it for
constantly
years.
saying,
yeah,
this is where we need to go.
Oh, it's so interesting. I think it's like, because if you think in terms of like the two cosmic realms, present evil age, new creation age, and these cosmic spaces that we're dead to and alive to, but we also inhabit both at the same time. Like that whole thing, it's like the powers and authorities are the kind of like the rulers of the present evil age, who are the geniuses behind making sure that it's a really messed up thing.
Well, see, here's why I've always been pushing for this.
Let's go, Stafford. Unleash.
See, now everything you just said about why you won't like think about it too much, I get that, right? Because even that will take us away from the agency or the responsibility that we have, or our function here, right? Because then we can just point fingers and close the doors and the windows and just be like, well, it's not me, it's this. I get that. The foundational understanding of like, and I mean like just strip bare foundational understanding that there are other players on the field, that these are influencers or whatever, just being like, hey guys, you should do this.
Hey guys,
that I think is so important. So I grew up similar. The way that people would talk about angels and demons was very like, either punishment, like you were not faithful enough or whatever, and because of that, a demon has been able to take a stronghold or foothold and cause negative things, whether it's disease or poverty or whatever. Something wrong is happening in your life. There's a reason for it. And then same thing with guardian angels, or these things that were like, thank God that this angel was able to pull me out of this thing. And even as a kid, I was like, I would sit so uncomfortably in church because that language tended to ostracize so many people. And we've talked about that a bunch with like, we prayed so hard and now so-and-so is free of cancer, but there's 3 other people in the church who are still dying of cancer. And they're like, dude, what did I do wrong? Because God answered that prayer, but not this one. So there's some intense, like something going on. But one of the reasons I think this is so important is because in that tradition that I grew up in, I was told that, you are kind of a piece of shit, right? Like and until you accept God and allow Jesus to completely change you, you're worthless. You're not worth anything. And all you will do is sin, 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 sin. But if there are influencers on the table, and God is interested in human flourishing and kind of like the restoration of this project, then that makes me feel like I have a little bit more like importance or worth or agency in the whole conversation, rather than just being this token that is broken on, that is manufactured broken, and then you're waiting for the warranty to kick in to give you kind of the full. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I feel like
it seem way too passive?
No, I think it's actually opposite. I think it's like, well, yeah, maybe the old version is passive, and this one enables us to be a part of the program. Like, we have a role to play here, and there are these entities who maybe, like we were doing Revelation last week, and Mike was talking about Rome and Babylon and Roma and these things, and I was like, hey, could this be a powers and principality issue where it's like, if God is advocating for human flourishing and the Sermon on the Mount ends with like, hey guys, I just gave you a whole bunch of things, but let me sum it up. Love your neighbor. So there's something about us participating in the restoration and the flourishing of other human beings, in community, in different ways, taking care of the poor, like everything it all comes back to like, how can you play this part, this role? Mm-hmm. And it seems like these gods in Revelation are like, they are influencing the opposite of that. They're influencing power and structure and power over, and how can you be the biggest and baddest on the block, and then how can you hoard, and then you can decide how you deal with the things that you're hoarding. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense to me. These entities, if this is true, are influencing nations in a way that causes us to individualize and to hoard and to make sure that you're the top, right? America is the greatest. We carry the, we're the city on the hill, and we're the biggest and the best. And we should do all the language we use about America is similar to all that language. So I feel like it's really important to understand this stuff just so that we have a functioning level to work from, because the old version, like I said, that I was given was not that. It was just, how can you toe the line?
Can I interrupt you?
Please do, because I'm rambling.
Well, no. I'm trying to fish for where the payoff is for you in this conversation. Is it that it feels like now that you have worth and dignity and agency in the world, and you're partnering with something that's happening in the world that matters?
Yes.
Is that the payoff, or is the payoff that you're not just sitting there passively as a sinner, screwed up, waiting until the warranty kicks in?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
I think when we use language of like kings and queens, or this initial idea that we were going to rule beside God in this way, and we had these roles and these tasks and these gifts and these whatever, and then that kind of gets flipped around, and you see that we start ruling differently immediately and trying to like lord over each other.
Yeah.
But if there's an influence to that, and we can learn that and choose against that, like, so when you're talking about, this is what it looks like, this is what spiritual warfare looks like. So before you guys did that, I wrote that down. Like, is this what this looks like? And then you went through, and I was like, okay, that makes perfect sense. Like, we are given a task with an understanding of, this is how you pursue kingdom dynamics. And you look around you, and when you see that that's not happening, this is kind of the way in which we work with, against, whatever, try to build in this world, right? And that makes a lot of sense, because that's congruent with so much other scripture. So when I think about every conversation we've had with you, the very first one I remember talking about sin and death coming into the world, almost as these entities that, and this whole, that we made all these Thanos jokes about like them coming in and blah, blah, blah. But there's these I'm trying to give linchpins through all this rambling for everybody that's kind of followed through all this stuff, because the powers and principalities come up in every single conversation, but we always have to like kind of be like, I don't know. Anyway, and then we keep going forward. So I don't know. I just think it's endlessly fascinating, but it seems important to have some level of understanding of, and maybe we lost that over time. Like you said, like the Jewish culture was working with some level of understanding that was a common knowledge almost.
Yeah.
And could kind of decipher and work through that with things. But now it's like, did we lose that? Was that lost in translation over time? And then what agency does that give to these entities?
Yeah. Does that, so are you saying it kind of gives like a fuller, richer description of the world that just makes a lot of other things make sense?
For me, it does.
Yeah.
And the mystery's fine. I'm fine with mystery, and I'm fine with not understanding most of it. That's fine. That's actually encouraging to me.
Yeah.
But a base level that it's not just like you're born broken, you're born tarnished and terrible, and until you figure this out, but then we watch everybody who prays the prayer run around lording over everybody.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that can't be it, because
that
doesn't look like Jesus. So there's got to be more to the story than that.
Totally.
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
It's been a very helpful,
three-dimensional.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, multifaceted, and it adds complexity, or it recognizes the complexity that is in the story, that is in Scripture.
Yes, it is complex. We kind of want a 2D version, and this is like a 3D version, and there's more to it. And I think just that understanding that there's more to it, that these entities can influence or want, like when we talk about the Joker and chaos, like, I just want to watch the world burn, these agents of chaos.
Yeah.
I think just understanding that foundational level is helpful to build a more active and constructive faith. and ability to love and invest in your community and to fight against those things that are pushing power over other people.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that orientation was lost when we lost any conception of salvation as communal. So if salvation is just individual, then demons are just individual, right? I have my guardian angel. I have demons assigned to keep me from growing. Like
Bugs Bunny
we just
theology.
don't have a category. We just don't have a category for corporate entities or corporate sin or corporate righteousness or any of those things, right? So that's why the justice convo is so problematic for us to have, because, well, I didn't own slaves, so what does it matter?
Right.
So I like, Tim, the great gift you've given has been the reminder that these operate on these massively huge scales that convince us that normal is
injustice is normal.
Yeah. That what we call normal really is upside down.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the way.
Well, even look at it in recent time with Black Lives Matter versus, and then the immediate uptick of All Lives Matter, and the inability to look at a system that has been unjust to certain people because we just don't want to have that conversation. So we immediately combat it with something else to keep it as two-dimensional as possible. And you just...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, you just see it. You see it all over the place. And it also helps me with this whole problem of evil conversation. Like there is chaos, tangible chaos happening. Makes it easier for me to look around and not be like, how could a good God allow this to happen?
Mm-hmm.
So Gombis, back to you for a sec. When we talk about being saved from something and Christ has defeated the powers and the authorities, what does that practically mean? That he's created an alternative community where there's space to kind of reconfigure ourselves, or like what does that mean? Because I've always heard the old saw was, well, he saves us from the penalty of sin, the power of sin, and the presence of sin. But that not all of that happens immediately. How would you like look at that differently in light of what the powers and principalities are?
Yeah. Salvation seems to me to be, well, it's kind of interesting because it's thinking in terms of like the already but the not yet. There's that sense in which salvation is not yet here. Like when the fullness of the new creation comes, we will be fully and finally liberated out of the present evil age. But right now it's like we still have bodies that are characterized by brokenness. Our bodies will die. We will die. But salvation is now in time, being liberated from the present evil age, being transformed, bodily and our inner person, whatever that means. And, knit together with a new community that is the community where Christ resides. And that's the space of freedom. So being transferred from the present evil age into the kingdom of God's beloved Son, I think is probably how I would understand it, knowing that community is going to participate in the fullness of new creation when it comes.
So to the degree that the church represents or reinstalls the dynamics of wrath in this present evil age and the powers, Paul condemns those churches in the strongest terms, right?
That's right.
Yeah, no,
go. Yeah, they're practicing. Go. Yeah, they're practicing the communal patterns of injustice and oppression and division and power seeking, all of that, competition with each other. They're manifesting that the present evil age is up and running. They're making manifest that Jesus Christ is not victorious over the fallen powers. I mean, that's how God's triumph is seen when a community takes up and practices and gains the skills of new habits.
See, and that makes a lot of sense. It really does. And that's, I think what's so frustrating is we were, so much of this was stripped out, and then it just becomes there. I don't know. There's so much to it that
like an
is
individual's
frustrating.
practice about my internal world and cultivating affections. And
the now and not yet stuff is really interesting in that conversation about the defeat of the powers. It's like they're defeated, but they're not defeated yet, but they are, but they're not.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking about like a cornered, injured animal, and how much more dangerous.
It's like they're thrashing around as they go down to their final death. They're just,
and we see
taking as much with them as they can.
Brene Brown was talking about like white male, watching the white male power over dying out, and how in some ways those guys are more dangerous now than they've ever been, because they see, and then you see Tucker Carlson, these people talking about like the great replacement theory, and so you see this scared, cornered, angry thing lashing out, and it's like, is that what this now and not yet is? Are we in a time period where these spirits know that they've been defeated, but they're still active, and so they're thrashing about? Like, is that?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of how it looks. And as the systems of oppression just do their damage, there will be damage. There will be damage. I mean, that's the promise of the way of Jesus, or the difficult part of it, is that it could get you killed, because that's what happened to him.
Yeah.
I mean, having solidarity with the oppressed and really advocating for justice will rankle people who are powerful, and they can do some damage. But the reality is, I mean, this is was it Martin Luther's hymn? Let goods and kindred go, this mortal life also. The body they may kill, God's truth triumphs still, or something like that. Anyway, the promise is that we'll be raised from the dead if we are faithful to Jesus, and that's when we'll be fully and finally home. I mean, that's why the first thing that you do as a Christian person, which is to be baptized, is to identify with the death of Christ, because I never was informed of that. It was always like this great, hey, baptism, wonderful.
Yeah. Welcome to the family.
It's all good. But it's like, this is, let goods and kindred go. You lose everything at the start, because if you're really going to have solidarity with those who suffer, you might suffer.
What?
Which is stinky.
No. Okay, yeah, we're done with that line.
But yeah, I think the powers are freaking out, and just like, there's a lot of damage being done.
Is that why, Mike, when at a church that we both previously were a part of, somebody in the mornings would walk around and do a little like oil cross on all the doorways, like anointing the building? Is it like?
Yeah. Well, I came from a tradition much like you, but we were introduced to some wonderfully, and I don't know whether the right word is Pentecostal or charismatic, but they were great. They were biblically grounded vineyard folks who had a way of understanding spirituality that was much different. Yeah. And it was, anointing and praying for the sick. And I don't know, I've seen things that I don't have a category for. So I'm open absolutely to the power of those sorts of things and the power of places. But yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm a little, the older I get, the more skeptical I become around spirit language that's divorced from tangible acts. Yeah. And I mean, my goodness, Tim, the thing that you just said about, so spirituality is the spirit produces a body. And so the actions with each other in that body are what either manifest the spirit or resist it. And so your private devotional life, it can't be spirituality on its own, because spirituality properly understood, like justice, is a communal concept. And that totally rocks everything I've understood about spirituality. Because for me, spirituality was opening myself up to the grace of God so that I would be transformed. Yeah. And I think that's true, but it's construed exclusively in individual terms.
So the quiet time for you in that is like, you're expected to take what you have in that as an offering to the community. And that is how that is edified. And
right. The preparation for spirituality is, I need to identify the dynamics up and running, to use another sweet Gombis phrase, dynamics up and running, both in the present evil age and in the new creation space of the church, so that I not only recognize them when I'm participating or others are participating, but I can resist them and embrace the new creation dynamics that stand in the stead of the old creation.
Yeah.
And that jives with the worship conversation.
Totally.
As well.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. Because worship is justice.
Yeah,
right?
totally. Worship is the whole.
The other reason why I think this is so important to have that ground level is because since we don't talk about it and there is no basic understanding or acknowledgement in the normal kind of Sunday setting, it is things like this present darkness that form people's imaginations and give them what they will define as the truth of, and then they act accordingly. Yeah. So it's like if we don't have these conversations, they will be had under different circumstances, and then we get a whole, so much.
Yeah,
mess.
Default understandings will sort of rule the day.
It's exactly the same as I Kiss Dating Goodbye or something like that, where it's like if the church is unwilling to talk about sex, then this 22-year-old kid who's never had sex or been in a relationship is going to dictate how an entire generation understands.
Sets the agenda, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you not use the word dictate, please? Just in that context. Sorry. That just feels a little awful. Well, Gombis.
Oh man.
Good Lord. We love you.
You guys are the best.
You're amazing.
It's always so fun. I rushed back from Kentucky just for this, to actually enjoy this, the high point of my Friday.
There it is.
Well, that's a low. Yeah, you just drove for 8 hours. So, I mean, that's a low bar.
I had some podcasts to catch up on though, so it was all right.
Yes.
Good time.
Yes. All right. Dude, you're the best. Check out Faith Improvised in all of its forms. Buy Tim's books. They are actually amazing.
Go and roll it fuller.
He will not. Yeah, go and roll it fuller.
Join us
quickly
on the journey.
Quickly.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Quickly. Yeah.
All right, fellas.
You can enroll.
Take care.
What? You're just
we
dropping
done?
Out? Well, yeah, we're done.
I don't know.
Do you want to do small talk afterwards, or you just
I'm
done?
totally up for it. I got all kinds of time. I just didn't know if you were dismissing me.
No. Good Lord. Can you dismiss the breath of God? Can you dismiss the sunshine? No. All you do is you just sit and enjoy.